Alrighty, well, welcome back for part 5 of our 5-part series and the cloud adoption framework. We've had a pretty good journey with you all, and so thanks for hanging out. We started off this journey with just going through kind of some of the introduction around the cloud adoption framework. We then jumped in and went through part 2, which was building out your landing zones, and we pulled Jeff Mitchell in, who helped us kind of demo and walk through that. Then we had Vlad kind of walk through how we manage and monitor. We then had Dave Bernison from GitHub walk us through building releases using GitHub Actions and kind of our DevOps pipelines. And I'm pretty excited that today we have another fantastic guest who's going to be joining us to walk us through some of the well-architected pieces on specifically around cost management, is Tanuja Shah. So we're going to jump right in, and we'll go through this. We're going to kind of just start off with a little bit of a recap, make sure that as we've gone through this journey, I don't know where you've kind of joined in from which particular series, but we'll kind of do a quick recap. We'll then talk a little bit about some of these, the principles of well-architected. How do we think about well-architected? Why have we built it? We're going to drill into the cost management piece. This is an area that many customers come to us with, not necessarily just to say, hey, I need to run cheap cloud, but it's really about, hey, I've been running cloud, or I've got these applications up and running. Am I doing things in the right way? Am I exposing the costs, and am I exposing these the various elements of my cloud back to the right people so that they understand what's incurred? Now, there's a multitude of different areas that we're going to be able to touch on as we go through the well-architected methodology moving forward, and we're likely to have more around reliability and cloud operational excellence, security, and so on. And so we'll talk through that as we go through it. Towards the end, we'll kind of walk through some resources and share with you where you can find some more information. But without further ado, let me just jump right back in. As you've all seen the slide, you're probably well familiar with the adoption framework right now. We've got these 3 kind of key pillars that we talk to. Business, all about building out your plan. Nothing kind of really gets executed really well without having a solid plan and a reason to actually go out and do this. And so that cloud adoption plan is really essential to kind of helping you guide you through the multiple phases of your adoption journey. Platform, all about landing zones all day, every day. This is where we put in our governance. We've spoken about the governance methodology and having those 5 key disciplines around governance: cost management, security, identity, resource consistency, and deployment acceleration. We've spoken around the guiding principles of enterprise scale, making sure we've got the right networking and IP schemas created. We've got the right subscriptions and management methodologies in place. How do we think about reliability? How do we think about BCDR? And you'll see that these things become very well connected as we go through the whole process, as we get into this well-architected conversation. And then the third big pillar of this, of the adoption framework, is all around workloads. So now that I've defined my plan, I know what I want to do, I've got a place to be able to put all these workloads, and now I want to go out and actually build these workloads. What are the best practices that we have today for whether I'm migrating a specific workload, or whether I'm building a new workload, a cloud native application? And so we've walked through some of the scenarios of where we actually have guidance in the adoption framework content itself, but also the different ADO templates that have been surfaced up to help streamline and support that. And as we've gone through the series, we've had new ADO templates drop. Just recently, we had a modern data warehouse project drop in. We've had a knowledge mining project drop in. We've got projects around how do we do governance. So we've kind of continued to accelerate these. We've got AKS and WB projects as well. And so at the end, I'll kind of show you the link where you can actually find those. We've walked through the manage paradigm, like how do we think about management? And today we're really going to start unpacking what this whole story looks like around well-architected. Think about this, across these 5 key vectors, and we're going to unpack them a little more. But really, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you look at your environment in a holistic way. If I just recap what we spoke about last time in session 4, that whole DevOps recap, it's this kind of union of people, process, and technology, really making sure that we have the right that end-to-end view and bringing people and process together. As I kind of think about well-architected, this is really all in this kind of monitor, learn, and how do we kind of continue to iterate and continuously iterate and continuously improve and deliver back to the business. And so think about that cycle that you're going through, where you are building out your release pipelines, you're putting your products into the cloud, your developers are working on it, releasing those products, they go into operations. We then want to be able to have these facilities and these mechanisms by which we can then continually evaluate and improve upon those applications that have been built and been deployed up into our cloud environment. So keep this in mind as you're going through. And as we spoke about in the last one, building out your DevOps practice is not something that happens overnight. It's an ongoing process, and it's going to be a continuous way of evolving and improving. So jumping in, kind of looking at how we think about well architected at Microsoft. We've got a ton of great assets that actually come together, and we're going to walk you through some of these, not only from just a product perspective, but also in terms of content and documentation to support you on your journey. And so irrespective of what application you're building or design principle that you're looking at, we've actually now got documentation to be able to go and support those particular reference architectures or those particular applications that you're building, and then to be able to guide you along the right path. Well-architected review is, one of the tools that we've got today that can actually help you unpack and get a visual into what's going on, as well as then deep recommendations on how to further improve that particular product or that application that you have across those 5 key disciplines: security, reliability, performance, efficiency, operational excellence, and cost optimization. So kind of thinking a little bit about who is on hook for this. When you go into it, it's really kind of best practices and guidance for architects, developers, or solution owners or application owners, anybody who's running and operating and building out a specific application. This guidance is intended for you. So the guidance that we provide is go in and actually run an assessment and an evaluation on those applications using the assessment tool, which I'm going to walk you through. Go and have a look at the scoring that you get based on one of these key areas. And so what is your applications costing you? Is there a way to improve that? How well are they running in terms of the operational excellence? Are they performing in the right way? So if I did an application lift and shift and a VM lift and shift, is it over provisioned? Is it under provisioned? If I look at a web app that I've built, kind of have I got the right performance going on within that application itself? Kind of think about it from a reliability perspective. If I have an outage in a specific area, what is my redundancy plan in place? Have I put measures to support that? And then, without a doubt, as I think about security of those applications, we're consistently getting triggers and alerts and things coming in that there are attacks. Kind of how do I make sure that I build up those applications and architect those applications using the latest best practices, the latest guidance that has come through from Microsoft in terms of this whole in terms of the methodology and the framework. So a couple of key things that we'd want to call out, when we think about cost optimization, not only are we going to look at it from just, hey, are we going to be cheaper, but are we doing the right thing? Are we right sizing? Do we have the right architectural design? And so you can see some of the points that we'll highlight here around looking at licensing construct. So if I'm using Windows Server, if I've got Red Hat Linux, if I am using SQL and I've got software assurance with these, kind of am I leveraging those hybrid benefits that I have associated with my licensing? If I have got a number of VMs that I know of a constant size over a period of time, am I thinking about reserved instances as a way to lower those costs? If I've got machines that are running in a sandbox environment, how do I think about that from shutting them down after hours so that I'm not incurring costs when they're not being utilized, because then we can free up their compute. How do I resize environments? And resizing those environments may have an increasing cost because I need to meet performance requirements, but it also could have a lower cost rate. And so kind of how do I want to think about that cost optimization and being fiscally responsible? Or as I kind of move from, maybe what started out as a project to do lift and shift and a migration, I now want to rapidly move that into some sort of cloud native PaaS-based solution, what is the impact of the cost on that side? Similarly, as I go through kind of this operational excellence pillar, do I have the right principles in place to seamlessly develop and build and take feedback and iterate on those products using my DevOps process? Can I respond to market conditions and respond to customer conditions and customer needs in a rapid way? We spoke through this scenario in episode 4 with Dave Bernison, where we went through the DevOps requirements, and so I feel like just as you start to kind of look at how you are structured operationally, are you meeting those requirements? How we think about deployment? Do we have consistency in the way that we're deploying, or are we physically having to create and rebuild applications and environments every single time? Can we not utilize code and infrastructure as code to be able to do that? Monitoring, processing, and of environments. Can I see what's going on with my assets? Can I respond to those assets at the right point in time? And so when we went through this conversation with Vlad, and we went through the Azure Manage content, he gave some really great insights into monitoring and processing changes of the environment and being able to drive automation around that. As we think about performance, are we building for scalability? If I have a major influx of individuals coming into my environment, am I going to be able to scale up quickly? And do I have methodologies in place to be able to help me monitor for when when that's happening? And so if I see spikes, can I then go out and automatically remediate and provide an environment that is going to scale with the demand? Similarly, as you kind of think about reliability, this is probably something that you're all familiar with. How do I think about test environments? How do I think about failovers? Do I have that consistency of deployment? Can I monitor health of those applications and get alerted of areas that are potentially going to fall over or potentially be exposed before they actually do? And then lastly, on the security side, we really want to make sure that we have best practices around identity and access management, looking at, do we know who's logging in? Do we know who has access into specific assets? Am I using things like just-in-time, conditional access reviews? How do I think about security and data encryption of my environments? Am I putting in the right guardrails around where my data can reside? And so when you think about that your data sovereignty requirements, I may have a set of policies or a set of rules that we spoke about in the governance phase that say, hey, applications that are built, data has to reside in a specific location, might be geolocation or in a specific data center, but I want to make sure that I have a methodology where I can keep going back to review this. And then finally, when you think about your SecOps and monitoring what's going on in terms of potential exposure or potential threats, have I built that into the architecture and into the design point of my applications that I've been putting out there? So that's a fairly broad view of well architected. Think about this as it's tightly connected into the way that we build out your platform, the way that you think about management of your environment, and then think about this as that ongoing process where you can systematically monitor, remediate, look at your applications, get guidance, ensure they're on for best practices, take that learning from that guidance, build them back into your app patterns, that as you are rapidly deploying these new services out, they have got best practices associated and assigned to them. All right, so without much further ado, I'm going to jump right into kind of the well architected content. I'm going to step you through this assessment. There's been a lot of great changes and evolution on the assessment platform, and so I think if you tried this out a couple of months ago, you'll see some of the changes. And so I've built out a fictitious application which I'll walk you through. I'm then going to take you through Azure Advisor. I'm going to take you through cost management and in the platform itself. Give you some things to go ahead and look at. I know we may have touched on some of this before. I wanted to spend a bit of time on the cost management actual environment today, and then go through and actually look at it from a Power BI perspective as well and show you the tool that's available. And then I'm going to hand over to Tanuja, who's going to walk us through a very practical cost optimization conversation, and how this all comes together in, in terms of scripts that you can use to identify where you have challenges, or at least where you can actually go and drive improvements within your environment. So let me jump right in. So firstly, standard landing place for everything, aka.ms/adopt. We will have those links in the IM window. We'll continue to put those links wherever, on the Dev Radio channel. But starting, just jump right in. I would go and explore, where you go ahead and explore the framework. Exploring the framework, you'll be able to get into the Architecture Center up at the top. Azure Well Architected has all been kind of completely, it's built out with those 5 key pillars. Take a step through. You've got access into the architecture guide, so the different types of architecture styles. Big fan of kind of the work that's been done around how do we do, Azure for AWS professionals, Azure for GCP professionals. While cloud concepts are similar, terminology and language is different, and so I think just helping kind of expose some of this stuff, I think is really powerful. How do we do things like performance tuning, various design patterns that you've got in your applications as well, or that you're looking for, or even just looking at it at a specific category level. I'm going to kind of go back, and I want to walk through a particular assessment. So in the getting started, this is the assessment center. You will have a range of these different assessments that are built out for you, starting off with the Azure Well Architected review. I've actually got one currently going, and I started this in April 28th, 2020, and I've subsequently just gone ahead and I've created a couple of new milestones. So if I just look at my environment over a period of time, where I started, I've now started to I can see how I've started to change based on the milestones that I've put in. And so my very first time that I went through this, I answered a series of questions on this particular review, and I had a couple of areas of guidance, but I'd only really answered 33 questions. I'd skipped off a couple of areas. And so what I've done over a period of time is now I've gone into milestone 1, and I've included or updated some new, some of the questions, and then I've also rapidly gone ahead and done a milestone 2, just to give you that sense of what this journey ultimately looks like. If I go in and just take a look at these particular results, so these were the results that I had right when I very first started. I can go and have a look at the categories that have been influenced over a period of time based on these 5 key disciplines, and then ultimately what it does is it gives me guidance around things that I should be doing more of. So here's my kind of recommendations. I can go in, and at that point in time, I'd answered questions that is now, where I hadn't got any tagging in place. I hadn't done anything around DevOps and deployed automation. I hadn't done anything around kind of locations and by different subscription offer types. So I've now got guidance into these applications and into these different pillars that I can go and take action on. If I go back for a minute and I look at and I can look at some of the what I've got in my various milestones. So let me take milestone 1, for example. You'll see that now milestone 1, and as we've changed some of the nomenclature and the language, you'll see the original one was DevOps. This has now changed to operational excellence. And you'll see that as I've started to update some more of these questions, you can see that my my overall result has actually changed. Similarly, when I go back in and I can see, hey, operational excellence, I've got 36 recommendations that I should probably go through to try and understand. Now, this can take some time, right? As you get better and better at doing these things, I think the idea here is it's supposed to give you that guidance on what are the key things that you should be looking at based on the inputs that you've given us. And then similarly, I'll just jump straight back in. I want to kind of show you the milestone 2. As I've gone ahead and got better and I've started to add more things into my environment, and I've done, you can see that my cost optimization has actually got better. My overall results have changed as well. And now I can start to see, hey, even with this, there's kind of five recommendations that I should probably take and take a look at in terms of really improving on that. So I think it's a great way to just keep tracking your progress over time. There's ability to go and put notes and things into that environment. So looking at, so where we've got content available today, we've got sitting in the adoption framework and going into that, going into the well-architected guidance, we've got the tooling to be able to help you assess and evaluate. And then lastly, I think I wanted to kind of walk you through a few things around cost management. And then I'm actually going to bring up the, I'll actually bring up the Power BI tool as well, so that you can then start to look at how we actually have brought this tool to market, where you can actually go and download it and utilize and for your own environment to get better analysis and a handle on what's going on within your within your Azure environment. So moving forward, Azure cost management tooling that's built right in. Think about this as a way of being able to give you insights into what's going on in the spend across your environment. Key thing that needs to happen, and what I found, with organizations, is really being clear on what your Azure hierarchy. Think about the management groups that you've got, the subscriptions that you've got in place, the resource groups. That all started when we went and built out the landing zone up front, and we've started to apply things like tags through policies. I've now got the structure that I can go and measure, and so I've got these various business, these management groups, so business unit, central IT, dev team, product team. I've even brought in my AWS environment where I can start to get a visual on what's going on in terms of my spend. But I can break this down. I can say, hey, which particular scopes do I want to look at? I've only got one subscription, so I'm going to just go back to my root and just say, hey, this is the one that I want to take a look at. So I'm looking at my entire environment. I'm going to call out a couple of things that I found useful and that customers kind of have missed as they've gone through this journey. One is just getting a quick visual of what's going on within your spend. The second is kind of being able to apply filters into that particular spend at the single kind of dashboard level. And so you can go into, what kind of charge type, what was the frequency, what was the location of where these services resided, which particular meter or sub-meter category, looking at reservations and your reservation IDs. So if you've bought reserved instances, here's where we can actually go and start to see your reservation usage, which particular resource group, which particular tag. And so if you've got specific tags that you've applied through policies, you can actually now go in and see, hey, I've got these application names, I've got this cost center tag, or I want to see for a specific AVP in my organization, what is the spend that particular organization is driving. So a nice, quick, easy way to go and apply these filters. Similarly, you can create dashboards where you can actually get some of that visual as well through the charts at the bottom. You can start to get there's different looks, whether you kind of an area aligned. You can group it by specific types of criteria as well. So if I wanted to see this based on location of where those services were residing, and let's assume for a minute I wanted to kind of do a stack column, I can start to see what that spend is, and this is all kind of US West. If I saw something that was kind of anomalous, maybe I saw a region that I wasn't expecting to be deployed in that popped up, that would be an area that I'd probably want to go and take a look at and start to understand what's happening as well. There's a couple other things that I would typically call out here. One is setting cost alerts, giving you the ability to go and actually create these alerts within your environment as well. And so if I just look at let me take a specific, I'm going to just take this, I'm going to take an alert on this particular subscription. And let's see if I have the ability. So on that subscription, I've got the ability to go and create a cost alert. And I can say, hey, whatever the name of this is, I want to call this thing monthly. I want to whatever the reset period is for the way that you want to track that spend. When do you want this to be created in the expiration date? The amount that you want to put in. So if I said, hey, at $45, we'll obviously give you a suggested amount. But on $45 is kind of the alert that I want to start getting. You can see it gets tracked out, and then go into next. If you remember back when we did the management groups and the management with Vlad, we were talking about action groups. Well, we can actually go and assign some of those action groups as well here. So if you wanted a very specific action to happen. So as you start thinking through that process and you start thinking about the environments that you have and how do you monitor, these are some of the tools and things that can be put in place where you can start to set your percentages of those particular alerts and then drive a specific action. Similarly, as we start looking at budgets, what is the kind of budget that we want to assign? And so you can actually create a budget, and then take specific actions on those budgets as well. And then finally, I'm going to jump into Advisor, not through there. So if I jump into Azure Advisor, Azure Advisor is one of those key tools that we would highly recommend that you utilize as part of your ongoing operational process for a couple of things. If you look at the cost, you've got these various cost recommendations that'll come up. Mine is all green. I don't have any recommendations at the moment. I've got a bunch of security recommendations that I probably want to go and act on. You can see that these align to those 5 key pillars of the well-architected methodology. So looking at your recommendations around how do we drive greater reliability, as well as then performance and operational excellence, these are all looking good. So I'm going to jump into kind of reliability for a second. You can see I've got a couple of things. I've got some storage accounts. I've got a virtual machine. So I may want to go out and say, hey, let me go and take these storage accounts and let's do something with them. I can actually go and remediate against that. I can postpone this, or I can dismiss some of these as well. If I jump into it, I can actually look at these resources and I can say, hey, I want to go in and actually go and enable the soft delete on that particular resource. So I can jump on in. I can, if I go in and enable, it's going to bring me into the data protection directly, and I can then go and take an action on that specific storage account. So Azure Advisor, one of these tools that I think is just probably grossly underutilized. I think there's tons of great insights that you can get, and I think Tanuja will show you a little later on around the code and using some of the scripts, which I believe kind of will pull from Advisor as well in order to surface that up. You can access all of this through CLI. And then I think the other thing that's pretty cool through Advisor is then you've got these various alerts. And so being able to go out and create alerts that we can share back to the organization, or you can take these alerts and once again push them back into some sort of action group where you can take maybe it's a webhook that gets kicked off, maybe you drop it into some sort of service, service DB, just to let us know, like, hey, here's an action that needs to happen on a specific subscription and a specific flag that is being highlighted. So with that, I think I wanted to kind of make sure that we'd touched on some of the key aspects. You've seen kind of some of the built-in tooling that we've got. You've seen some of the resources that we've got from Advisor. I'm going to quickly pivot over and show you how we've got, Azure Cost Management within a Power BI. And this is mock data, so it's not looking at my actual environment because I don't have an EA. But when you think about the Power BI dashboard, clicking through to this particular link, and we will drop the link into the IM window as well, so that to make sure that you have that, you can actually go and activate that particular Power BI dashboard. You can connect up, and in fact, let me just click through it very, very quickly, just so you get a sense of what to expect. You connect your billing profile, the number of months you want to pull down, what is the enrollment number, authentication, and sign in. And so those three steps will get you get this dashboard up and running for you. I'm actually just sharing this up through my Teams environment because I've got a common team that looks at it. But I can pull in things like, hey, my subscription names, what's happening in terms of my billing over a period of time. I can see my usage by subscription. And so I can go and take action if I see any particular subscription that's completely over the top. I can look at specific usage drivers. So which particular meters are driving the highest amount of use, and then kind of drilling into the actual meter name. I can look at it at the usage by services as well. So am I seeing any kind of craziness going on in terms of specific services that I wasn't expected? And this is something that a platform and our operations team can look through, or even go ahead and delegate some of that to the teams that they have working around their environment. And then finally, as you kind of look at things like Azure Hybrid Benefits, I can start to see what is my hybrid benefit usage over a period of time, which particular machines were activated in the last 7 days, what are the kind of SKUs that have been enabled as well. And then I can go down and actually have a look and see all the resources that I have today in Azure, which are the VMs that are being utilized, and do I have the hybrid benefit enabled, yes or no? And then I can actually say, take action on those specific environments where if I enable a hybrid benefit, I can then go and save money on those particular machines that are actually running. And so you can see the costs and the quantity and so on and so forth. So tons of great views within the PBI pre-built. And then you get the ability to go and actually see, things like your RI coverage. What are your RI savings? How do we do things like reserved instance chargeback? And so on, and then as well as then kind of reserved instances that have actually been purchased over a period of time. So a bunch of tools. I know that's a lot. I'm going to go ahead and throw this over to Tanuja, who's going to walk you through a kind of very practical example of how do we think about cost management and some of the additional resources that are made available to you. So Tanuja, over to you to share your screen.
Hey everyone, this is Tanuja Shah. I am a senior cloud solution architect, and I'm going to walk you through a customer scenario. We've stripped out the customer name and everything, but this is the typical current architecture in their Azure footprint. And this is pretty much a widely used architecture that we've seen. Our cost optimization process really focuses on looking at how you're currently consuming Azure services, right? And so we'll take a quick look at this architecture, and then as we progress through our cost optimization process, towards the end of this presentation, I'll show you where we started and focused on the optimization process for this particular customer. With that being said, how do we really save money? With Azure, as you have, your choice of services that we offer, there's a plethora of options that you have. Typically, all the customers that we've dealt with so far, or personally I work with, have the basic mindset of lift and shift because they were the early adapter of Azure platform. And to that end, what they did was they lifted everything off of on-premises and just shifted it to Azure. So in other words, if you would, take it as a data center move. So locating your on-premises data center, shifting it into Azure, into somebody else's data center, or in Azure's case, Microsoft data center, right? And that's not the optimal way of doing things. So initially, even if you did do the lift and shift, here's your chance to kind of start thinking, how do we really optimize this footprint to get the best out of the investment that we put in. So here are the three major steps that we go through our cost optimization guidance. Number one is reduce waste. That's a no-brainer, right? Anytime there's waste, it's just incurring cost and really not being productive for you. Second is moving up the Azure stack. What do I mean by that? Just like I said, it's a move, the move that people did from data center to another data center, lift and shift, is now are looking back and saying, how do we improve this process? So anything that was on the infrastructure as a service layer of the model that we offer as a services on platform, Azure platform, you could now think about, well, can we do this as a PaaS or platform as a service, or even further up, SaaS, which is a software as a service, or functions as a service, because as you move up the stack from heavy infrastructure to less infrastructure to no infrastructure layers, your cost is really well justified and well balanced, and in most cases it can even reduce to substantially reduce as well. The third step that we take is, if you're going to build new solutions, can you then engineer them for cloud first mindset, right? So far, we've been building things with saying, well, it can run in this data center and it's going to go through this full DevOps lifecycle. how about if you do that same mentality, except for you build it for cloud, meaning it's more productive for a cloud solution type of environment. So these are our 3 quick tactical way of addressing your cost issues right away. And then we have a strategic approach to it, which I'll go over in a long-term sustainable approach, because right now at this stage, if you're already a big heavy user of Azure, you're kind of doing a catch up. So let's go through this process real quick. Number 1 was the reduce waste. How do you do that? Well, lots and lots of customers that we went and visited and run this process through had tons and tons of unattached disk or orphan disk, if you will. What happened was early on when you deleted a virtual machine, it didn't necessarily delete the attached disk to it. And some of the SKUs allowed you up to 10 to 12 disks to attach to a virtual machine instance. So in the event when you deleted that machine or disallocated the machine for whatever the reason, these disks that were attached with the instance never got removed. And then they kept incurring costs. And that's why your bills kept going on because these were not taken care of. So how do you take care of that? Let me quickly show you. We have a support docs. This links will be provided to you at the end of the presentation. But in other words, what you could do is, let me see if I can, oops. Bring up the, so here's a real quick and easy support document that consists of our script to collect data about any unattached managed disks. So if you are using managed disk or unmanaged disk, we have partial or partial commands for you to run and get that information right away. So this one right here is to find out against all your subscription, how many of unattached disks you have, which are managed, and further down there is an unmanaged. So really to make it super simple, you could just do a copy. This will copy the commandlet for you in your clipboard, and then you can paste it into your CLI. The other way to do that is try it. This will actually open up your CLI portal for you, and then it will, you can run that. The only one caution here that I would like to call out is when you run them with the options of 0 or 1, be very careful. 0 is to find what's unattached, and 1 is to delete it. Okay, so this will actually find it and delete it, so be careful when you use that. But the same concept goes for unattached disk or unmanaged disk, sorry. The same thing, it's a bigger, longer commandlet because they're not managed disks. So same concept, copy, try it, and you're good to go. So this is something you really quickly have a quick fix to look at unnecessary expense that you're incurring. Next up, Wayne kind of covered this earlier with the hybrid benefit. Currently, we only monitor through our Power BI just the Windows licensing. So anytime you have a software assurance agreement with Microsoft, you have the ability to bring that over to your cloud footprint. So any Windows-based machines that you use, any virtual machine instances that you use, you can apply those licenses to them. We are in the process of including the SQL portion into our Power BI. We're just not there yet, but look forward to that in a real near future. Next up is Azure Advisor recommendation. Again, this one also Wayne touched it briefly, but this is really, really very, very important. Every morning, if somebody is monitoring your cost, your FinOps department, whoever is taking care of the finances, or your Azure cloud leads should be monitoring this, because this really shows you where you are and where you can really start saving cost. The advisor recommendations consist currently of right sizing. If you have virtual machine instances that are underutilized, meaning they're not even they're below 5% use memory and CPU, it's going to bubble that up in the advisor. So really, advisor is your best friend. If you wanted to take a look at the quick a stopgap type of stop of cost, wastage. So take a look at that, and let me demonstrate that really quickly through our support doc. I won't spend too much time because Wayne just went through it. So let me get to that real quick. And that is right here. This is all built into your Azure portal. As soon as you go to the advisor blade, you would see all 5 pillars under VAF represented here, and their scoring. So right now, because we're talking about cost, in this example, in this screenshot, you'll see that there are 1 high and 2 medium recommendation for your cost. So when you're looking at this, you can click on it and expand that. When you expand it, it's going to show you what these recommendations are. And Wayne showed you in his earlier demo sandbox that you can literally go in and click on these to expand and elaborate a little bit more on this. But you could take these recommendations. Some of them are actionable. Some of them you can postpone, or you can dismiss if you think that these recommendations are really not justifiable. And a classic case where you may want to just dismiss them is, let's say, for example, you have a workload that uses a very heavy or high-end SKU like E-series SKU, which is very expensive, but your workload really demands it. And what happens is when we have businesses like e-commerce, they have seasonal businesses, and so therefore these SKUs are not always 24/7 used. So within that 7 days time frame, when advisor goes and collects this data, it sees that, well, for 7 days it was underutilized, and therefore it pushes it into the advisor. However, your workload's better, so you would say, well, no, this is not correct, and therefore I can dismiss it. So be very careful. Take the advisor recommendation with a grain of salt. Understand your workloads before you start taking them. But in general, our recommendations are to, on spot, and they're filtered now, starting to filter with a work lens, or a service lens rather, or application lens. So where you can say, well, okay, I want to just see the Cosmos DB advisor recommendation. So you could now go into the categories of Cosmos DBs or SAP or what have you, right? So that happens within your Azure Advisor. So that's another quick way of start your cost savings there. Next up is reserve instances. And I'm not going to spend too much time here because when I go into the Power BI template app, I'll show you how you can leverage these RIs to quickly have the savings, because RIs are discounted prices with your agreement of 1 year or 3 year. And I'll go over that detail in a minute. The other key recommendation is the environments. If you have environments deployed in Azure that are development, staging, QA, etc., right? Do they need to be 24/7? Really? I mean, production, you can justify that, but do you have anything that has to be always 24/7? If not, consider auto shutdown. There are scripts, there are runbooks that you could run. In case of you're testing out an application, try auto scaling. There's no need to have a 15 virtual machine sitting there expecting a load test. Instead of that, depending on the workload's need, think about auto scaling. Burstable SKUs, they give you the similar results as auto shutdown, because what they do is while they're ideal, they just they shut down the CPU usage, and then you collect credit against them, and they're B3s. Now, one thing I would like to call out is they're not appropriate for every workload. If you have a production-based workload that's heavily used, you do not want to do a B series. But if you're doing a QA or staging of something, burstables are really your best friend there. So those are your really quick and dirty way of assessing what is going on with with your current usage, and that's how you reduce waste in your environment. So now that I've recommended that, well, there are ways to reduce waste, how can you know that when you are onboarding a workload, you're doing it the right, the right process? Is this the right way to do it? So we've created this little quick reference of a decision-making tree. If you're doing a net new build, what do you do? How do you make that decision? So new, if you're building new, here are our recommendations to you. Do you require to have a full control? As in, do you require a full control of how you manage that virtual machine instance or that entire workload? If that is yes, then you go to virtual machine, which is your infrastructure as a service. Keep in mind that this requires IaaS subscriptions, so you're spending a little bit more because you're paying for infrastructure as well. If it is not new, it's an existing workload, can you migrate it from your on-premises to the cloud platform? Yes, you can. And will it be then lift or shift or cloud optimized, right? So if it is cloud optimized, then you have to start thinking about, well, if I'm going to optimize it, what are my options? So here's your starting. I'm going to go ahead and decide that this is going to be my, I'm going to migrate this because it's a legacy app. So to migrate that, what are my options? Lift and shift, cloud optimize. Let's say we want to go, because it's a legacy app, I have to lift and shift. Well, if I'm going to lift and shift this massive legacy app, can I containerize it? Can it be running, because these are your optimum choices to get the best out of the investment that you put in Azure. Now, if I cannot containerize it, then what are my other options? Well, can you use app services, right? Because app services is another way of putting your deployment slots and then testing your application out without having to really pay for each instance of your app running on a different virtual machine. So this is kind of our, a very high level guidance. But again, we'll share this with you so you can start leveraging this into your environment. So that is the decision tree, and this really gives you a rough start into saying, okay, I'm going to onboard this workload because this is the right way to do it and make that decision. The other way we also recommend that you start monitoring once you onboard your workloads is to start putting on target. The reason I emphasize on this and call it out in this presentation is because a lot of customers that we really worked on early on, adopters of Azure, didn't have set targets. And the importance of targets is really, really monumental to success of having a mature cost optimization process. In this example, this is just a sample. Each the subscriptions were broken down by teams or groups or cost center, however your business demands it. In this example, it was broken down by apps engineering teams, and then each team had a target set for a month. Now, this doesn't have to really apply to you. Your cadence can vary by quarter or 6 months or weekly or whatever is really right for your business. But setting this up as the targets gives you that visibility into where the cost is going. Each team is responsible to manage their cost, and at the end of your 3-month or a month cycle, come check out what the variances are. If your customers went, if your teams went over, then figure out why we went over, right? And the teams that were under or on target, figure out how they did that. What was their success? What did they do to stay under, and celebrate that success and adapt that process for every other department in here. And the key thing is that having the target and forecasting, it kind of puts an accountability on the people who are responsible for this. Here's one of the things that we did internally when we migrated out of our data centers into cloud, because we had a real push from the leadership to get everything off of on-premises into cloud. So here's what we did. Our thing went the same way. We broke it down by teams, and then we started putting monthly target for each team. And then at the end of the month, we would have a meeting where we called it live site reviews, and everybody will have this visibility from top down. They all see that this department was going over, and it's not to put departments on shame, but really just having that visibility across the board to say, well, if you monitor it, then you have the reason to figure out why we went over and then take the corrective action. So this is what we call it a light site reviews, and we highly recommend that to all our customers. Another thing that you want to really, really be careful about, and I want to call that out, is onboarding is extremely crucial to cost management, because if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out, right? Make wise decision, use our decision tree guidance, but at the same time, use this tool called Azure Migrate tool. What this tool allows you or facilitates basically is calculate your readiness for Azure. Let's say if I wanted to bring a SQL workload into Azure, then I can go into this tool. This is freely available to you. And I can plot some numbers, pop in some basic prerequisites, like I'm going to need 4 SQL server, I'm going to need 2 app servers, I'm going to need, this amount of storage, this amount of, RAM, et cetera, et cetera. So once you plot those numbers out, it's going to crunch them for you and give you an estimation. And this estimation in our use is pretty darn close. I won't say it's 100% accurate, so don't quote me on that, but you should be able to get pretty accurate approximation of a number per workload, depending on what you put in. Now, this also 100% doesn't calculate the 40% of your A-Hub or your corporate discount. So once you have those calculated, those added in, it will give you those numbers. But what I'm saying is it's automated process. This will crunch up this number for you. And as I said, it's a monthly cost estimated within your currency, depending on where you are. But that's highly recommend this tool for your usage. And then now I'm going to just quickly go into the Power BI demo that Wayne referred to earlier. You do need to download this app. It is freely available to you, and you get that from our website here. And then I'll demo that as well. So let me quickly jump to that. And this is my demo one, and I think Wayne went over this one as well. But to begin with, this is where you would go and you would get your download the app. So if you go quickly right here, right there. So it will, this has to be run within your environment, and it does require you to have a enterprise admin read permission and a full Power BI license, okay? Power BI Pro license. But that's exactly how you would download and you would run that. Once you run it, it creates this report. If you look at the left column here, each of these tabs are a report that Wayne went over in his introduction piece. But the overview is this. It's going to give you this, overall holistic picture of what is your Azure footprint doing. You can filter it out by the subscriptions. If you have hundreds and hundreds of subscriptions, you don't want to look at everything in one pane, then you can filter those out. I have just for Contoso, our demo environment, but I could include all of these if I wanted to, and the numbers will change reflectively. One of the key thing here that I want to call out is there's a limitation to this range. The only reason I've done is 3 months is if you have hundreds of subscription, when you start to export this data, there is an Excel limitation that comes to about how many rows you can export. So it is really recommended to do like 3 months or 6 months at the most, and limited to a subscription. I can also filter it out to a resource group if I'm only interested in a resource group. In this scenario, I have just default resource group, but if I had a resource group identified for development, for staging, etc., I can filter those out and say, hey, why is development taking this much, this much cost, and kind of double click on that scenario. The next report, again, same thing here, usage by subscription or resource group. Right now, this looks kind of daunting if you look at it, but all the resource groups are showing up as to what they're consuming within your full Azure footprint. But if I wanted to break it down by cost, this is the easy one I would do. And then again, you can break it down. You can click on this high consuming, this spike. What happened here? If I wanted to investigate that, I can go and look at it, and it says from December to March, this particular resource group was consuming the high amount of almost 2,544 US dollars. So what went on? And then you can really just go to the responsible group, figure it out what was going on. Were they seeing the spike because it was a workload specific? That's how this workload behaves. You do that here. But I can do that again, same time range. I can filter it by subscription and resource group. The key area that I really wanted to bring to your attention was the Azure Hybrid. This is, there's a little bit of a misconception here. The way the licensing works is you get one license of Windows Server gives you 8 vCPU, virtual CPUs. So if I have let's say, for example, a Windows machine that has a SKU of only 4 vCPU and I apply one full license, it's a waste for me because the 4 CPU that I could leverage more is being wasted because the license is applied to only a SKU that is using 4. So you want to do drill down into this and figure out if I have virtual machines that are currently not taking the full advantage of my hybrid benefit. This is the chart you really want to work with, and then leverage this table at the bottom here, which shows you which SKUs are currently in use, and respectively how much it's costing you. But if I had a SKU with 8 vCPU, take away the license from the 4 and apply it to the 8 to get the best out of it, right? One of the other thing that I would call out, these are all exportable data. You click here. If you click here, I can export this data right away and it will generate a Excel report for me. So you can save all of these individually and then combine them to see a holistic historical data as you need. Same thing for the RIs. We represent RI by reserve instances by your usage. Anything that you see here with the dark blue is what you've purchased as a 1-year or 3-year reserve instances, and anything is light blue is what you're paying as on demand, which is very expensive. So this chart will give you an insight into what's happening as far as the reserve instances are concerned. You can again filter these out by SKU if I wanted to see what SKU is most consuming and what should I buy as an RI. These charts are amazing. I can I can filter it by category. If I have heavy series, FS series is very heavy, very expensive. So I want to see, oh, wow. So for 3 months, I've been using it consistently to this amount, this many CPU hours. You know what? I'll do the RI for this for 1 year because I know for sure this workload is going to be there. And you could do that across the series. You can also do it by CPU hours and whatnot. Okay, so leverage that report to your benefit. In this table, again, export if you need to, but we give you our recommendation based on the usage of last 7 days. If you're not using them appropriately, we'll recommend you the lower SKU so you can start saving here. And then same goes for single instance recommendations. Your total RI savings are also included here. And if you are a chargeback using a chargeback showback model, this report is awesome for you because now you can go to the respective subscription or the resource group owners and say, hey, you are not using this to the highest benefit. Here's our recommendation, start using this RIs across this resource groups or this resources, etc. And then if you had any RI purchases, they'll show up here for that time range. In this case, I don't have any so to reflect it, but they'll reflect if you had any. And the last but not least is the price sheet. This is your corporate discount. So if you ever wanted to drill down on each specific resource and see what it's costing you, you'll have to do a little bit of a math here, but you have your corporate discount prices here, okay? So that's your really Power BI report in a nutshell. And then let me quickly go back to my presentation and we'll go over the what is remaining as a result of our Power BI app use. As I mentioned, the Power BI is really only applicable with that app through enterprise agreement. If you're not an enterprise agreement customer, then don't worry about it. We can allow you to start using these APIs. Basically, this API calls are made behind the scene, and they collect the same information that you saw in that automated report form with the Power BI template app. So this is available to you. These are public-facing APIs. As long as you have registered your tenant with us, you should be able to run these APIs and make those calls. So as I promised, the customer that we work with, the biggest challenge for them and the biggest consumption was the IaaS layer, which meant that they were using infrastructure as a service. So one of our biggest recommendation to them was to start using managed instances on the SQL Server load, which they adopted, and that's how they had their cost savings, immediate cost savings to almost half of what they were spending on the IaaS infrastructure as a service SQL instance server. So hope all the information that I provided helps you. I know I went over it really fast, but happy to help and engage with you if you have further questions. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Wayne again. Thank you, everyone.
Tanuja, that was great, and I really appreciate you going at the level of depth that you did. I think it's hugely valuable and just shows how, when we kind of look at architecture and you look at the kind of well-architected methodology that we've put out there, how these things are all intrinsically connected, right? And so as you start to think about, starting with your costs, what are you trying to achieve? Then you kind of look at what, the environments that you're building. You look at how reliability would have an impact, how security has an impact, and so I think it's just it's a great story. And so thanks so much for walking through those resources. As always, I want to close out with some links and references, some things that you can actually go out and take a look at. aka.ms/adopt. Go ahead and check out the CAF site. It's a starting point. The plan generator site is really about those adoption patterns. We've got well-architected guidance built into each of those various adoption patterns as well. Have a look at the architecture framework. You can get to it from the adoption framework site as well, but how do we think about adoption those architecture patterns? Channel 9, Tanuja has actually done a bunch of great videos on there as well, so I would encourage you to go onto the Channel 9 site, have a look up for well-architected, do a search on cost management, and you'll find some more of those deep dives on that front. And then encourage you to go and utilize those assessments. Look at those assessments, look at the applications that you're running, get yourself a baseline, and then continue to iterate on that. Use those milestones within the tooling to get a better sense of where you're at. So thanks for joining. I appreciate spending the last 5 kind of sessions with you. It was great to kind of get all this get this content out there. Follow us on LinkedIn, connect with us through Dev Radio. Utilize the adoption framework. If you've got any content that you're wanting to present, please go ahead and utilize the means to kind of go and update that content in the CAF guidance as well, like using some of the mechanisms that we showed you in the DevOps pipelines through GitHub. And with that, I appreciate you hanging out. Take care.